Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. Well, I'm so excited to celebrate with you once again, my friend and leading evolutionary astrologer in the world, Maurice Fernandez. Now, I know you've seen Maurice on my channel so many times. And of course, he is the author of a beloved book on Neptune as well. Maurice and I are actually going to be doing an event very soon. It is the first weekend of October at the iconic Omega Institute. And so the Omega Center is just outside of New York City. It's a short ride away. And it is this incredible space that I know has meant a lot to me over the years. And now to be able to go to actually be presenting something there, thanks to Maurice and his trust, it really is such a privilege. And so we're going to talk about astrology, consciousness, the great shift, the sacred feminine. But what I'm really excited to talk to him about is the astrology of September and the big eclipses and more that we have going on right now in 2025. Maurice, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's always exciting. And yeah, there's so much going on before the event and then leading up to it. So let's get started.
Let's do that. So let's just jump in with the September astrology, because you and I, every time we talk for the last couple times, it's been like, oh, we know each other so long. We love each other. Everybody knows that already. So let's jump in. September. What strikes you first off? Like, what is the early stuff just before we get to eclipses, which I know is a really big deal on the 7th? Is there anything in the first week that you think ends up being significant?
Well, two eclipses, they always come in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So we begin this time with a lunar eclipse on September 7th. And the next one is going to be the solar eclipse on September 21. And this year, it coincides with the equinox, which means the shift of seasons, but also the shift of cardinal signs in astrology. The Libra sign begins. Now, just to note, there's something people may know, people may not know, but these eclipses have a 19-year cycle. And lunations in general are a 19-year cycle. So if you go back 19 years, which would be September-ish 2006, we had the same degree eclipses, which was a lunar eclipse at 15 Pisces and a solar eclipse at 29 Virgo. So try to see if it was meaningful for you and how this informs, obviously, the current times. It doesn't mean the same thing will happen, but it can mean whether this series of eclipses can be meaningful for you. So this is called the metonic cycle.
And what do you think about, I know we don't like to talk about politics and things, we're not doing that here necessarily, but what do you think that these eclipses might signify in terms of the world, in terms of how we're feeling, in terms of what developments could be taking place?
You know, it's a Virgo-Pisces axis. And I'm talking about the United States because it seems to be creating headlines every minute with new dramas and new unexpected twists and turns. But at least and you can tell me, maybe in Canada, there are similar trends, but some of the things that are on the agenda as far as Virgo and Pisces is jobs and health. So right now we see the United States, having one of its lowest employment rates, and job growth is slowing down, as well as and many people losing their jobs. Part of it is because of the deportation. Part of it is because of the quote unquote efficiency measures with government office. So we see a huge crisis in the labor force of Virgo. And then we have RFK, who is, some love him, some hate him, very controversial figure, but he's doing a lot of change on the health front with now, for the first time in a long time, vaccines are not mandatory anymore in Florida. So a lot of debate, question about healthcare and health, Medicaid and Medicare. All these things are with us, and they seem to be amplified by the eclipse. Now, on a personal level, because we see what's going on in the zeitgeist and what people are talking about on a global level, but how does this apply on our own personal life is, are you taking good care of yourself health-wise? Are you, is it a good time now to recalibrate and, look at where you need better balance? And then at work, do you have new opportunity? These eclipses can bring amazing opportunities, because that's what eclipses do. They speed things up. Think about eclipses like a portal, right? The sun, the moon, the earth, everything's aligned. And then the light goes out, which means there's something of a higher nature. It's not fully in your control. But then it moves and shifts things rapidly. So there could be changes at work. There could be new revelations, new development. That's part of it. But, focus, try to see how professional development as well as healthcare are, expressed in your personal circumstances.
I also was thinking that this, with this vaccine mandate now sort of on its way out, or it feels like there's this resistance to it. And I was thinking about how much I'm actually seeing Pluto in Aquarius here, right? Which is like sort of the dark side of the collective, and it's trine Uranus. So there's this sense of freedom and individuality to it, but it is setting the stage for, the dark side of gathering, which is you can make each other sick. And I know my grandfather had polio, of course, before I was born, but he always walked with a limp as a result. And my parents knew people when they were very young who had tuberculosis and things like that, people who died as well with these serious diseases. And to have that eradicated, was such it seemed like such a big step forward. And now this is happening. And yeah, I mean, it just feels like it's setting the stage for. And in particular, let me tell you, because I just did this presentation on Chiron in Taurus, and we are going to have this moment of Chiron conjunct Saturn in Taurus, exactly squaring Pluto. Now that's coming up in a few years' time, but that sounds like, I'll tell you, it just sounds like we're setting the stage for that to maybe not, to go the way that we know it's likely to go, considering what's happening right now, which is how groups end up really causing wounding And are those wounds going to last? Like my grandfather walked with a limp for the rest of his life after he had polio as a very young person. Isn't it
Yeah.
fascinating to think? Yeah.
I mean, it is fascinating. A lot of these this new administration, which is not just in the United States, but it takes, it has global effect. It has a rippling effect. It has this kind of mandate for change. The problem is that, yes, everybody wants change. The healthcare system needs a revamp. The pharmaceutical companies are corrupt. There's a lot that can be cleaned up. But the way it's done is very reckless. You want a secure border and you end up brutalizing people in excessive ways. You want to cut costs, and then you got a humanitarian organization that risk, the death of millions of people around the world. So there's the intention, the idea on paper has merit, but the execution is very heartless. And that is part of what has been happening. You talk about Neptune, these last moments of Neptune in Pisces and Aries is, where is the heart? Where is the compassion? It seems to be, whether we look at the Middle East, whether we look at the United States, it's gone missing, and it needs to be recovered. But as far as RFK goes, the same thing happens, is that the idea of making America healthy again, or healthy for the first time, is not a bad idea. The problem is the execution. And you speak about vaccine, there's a lot of controversy about how vaccine evolved over time, that it's not the same as it used to be. They add a lot of new ingredients. But if you bring Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus are the sign also that represent science. And it's almost like, do we rely on science? Do we trust? Pluto is about trust. Do we trust science? Or suddenly, science has abandonment issues. There's a lot of people who now come with their own theories and discredit a lot of the research that's being done. So I think that we are, with Pluto in Aquarius, dancing with, on the one hand, wanting progress, wanting the future, a better future. But are we actually going backwards? That is a big question with this Pluto in Aquarius and trine Uranus. When we see human rights records, when we see quality of life, and, having to fight battles that we thought were already over. Women's rights and the ability to have autonomy over your body, and all kinds of social privileges that we thought were secure, and now are again in question. So it's very interesting to see how Pluto in Aquarius does bring that shadow.
Love that you mentioned, that make America healthy again. The intention behind it for a lot of people, not saying anything about people in power or what's going on that level, but I can understand that people are afraid, especially for their children. And we have seen a whole lot more autism than ever before. Seems that way, certainly. And I get it. I get that people are afraid, and there's so much information out there, but it just seems like it's Pluto. We're going about it in a very extreme way.
Mhm.
Um, and, that's what happens. I get it. There's this theory that the pharmaceutical companies deliberately have things there to make people sick because that way they make more money. And that's what happens in a for-profit system. Like that is, it is more likely that you're going to believe something like that in a for-profit system as opposed to, somewhere like in Canada. It just isn't something that I see discussed the same way. And I
I
think
mean,
that also says a lot about the layers. What do you think?
to me, if I have an agenda to make America healthy again, the first thing I will do is protect the environment because that's where our food comes from. That's where, our rivers flow and water sources and whatnot. So when you have an agenda to make the country healthy, but then the environment is poisoned, and you eliminate conservation and protected areas, it shows how slogans are not really backed up. And I think that as we move into this Aquarian age, a lot of Aquarius energy, not just Pluto, but I was talking about, you were talking about the trine with Uranus. There's also, the whole AI threat that on the one hand, we want to move forward into new technology and perhaps AI will help us. But on the other hand, it is draining our resources. AI is pumping electricity at excessive levels that we cannot fully sustain at this point. And there's an article I wrote about Neptune in Aries, because Pluto and Neptune are always in a sextile during our generation. They kind of move at about the same rate. So for about, I think 7 more years, they're locked into this sextile. And so everything that Pluto does, Neptune reflects. And as Pluto pushes for this new technology and advancements, Neptune in Aries is about how do we power this? Do we have the grid system? Can it hold? Do we have enough water? Do we have enough electricity? Do we have enough energy? Aries, energy. And so we risk moving into an era of an energy crisis if this is not, mitigated and negotiated. But on the other hand, yes, the beauty of this kind of Aries Aquarius dance is freedom. It is liberation. It is a lot of people being able to find their voice again. And let's see, because we're going to see both the shadow side of that and the breakthrough side of that.
Yeah, and whatever it is, we're going along for the ride, it seems. And this is something that a lot of people have pointed out as well. It seems that there's not the kind of resistance to practices and policies that are being put into place that are perhaps more extreme than they were in 2017, 2018, 2019. But it seems like there's so much less resistance. And I think that's a part of it. Like we're just kind of going along for the ride in many ways. More of us are. And I think a part of it is that we reflect back on, the second part of the last decade and think, well, it wasn't so bad. It didn't end up so bad and whatever. and so that's part of the reason too. But it is interesting how there are wonderful things that can happen with Pluto trine Uranus. But right now, as we're speaking, that trine is so close to exact. I mean, it's just off by a few minutes. It's so close to being exact. And it just really feels like the resistance just isn't there to the things that are changing for better or worse. And I think a lot of astrologers, myself included, we'd hoped that that could mean more because, of course, it's the sign of Aquarius. It's Uranus is involved here. So we thought maybe this could represent more equality, more progress, right? More progressive things coming into play in ways that are embraced. But in a way, I guess, even this aspect is being interpreted and being realized differently. And so the national government of the United States is using this energy one way, right, to make the world like hyper individualistic and more electronic and able to monitor everything a lot more. But then you look at what's happening in the major cities and you see these young people who are rising into positions of power or want to take on positions of power and how they are embracing this energy. It's very, very different. I mean, Zoran in New York City has captured really a lot of attention in so many places right now. And he is also one side of this energy, but just a very different way of bringing it forward.
I mean, astrologers look back at previous cycle in hindsight, and we go straight to the peaks of these era. If you go back 250 years to the previous Pluto in Aquarius, you see the revolutions, you see the industrial development. But understand that in order for France to realize it needed to oust its king and to create a revolution, they needed to sink to a bottom and to an intense crisis. And so the same with the United States. The United States, was just born with Pluto in late Capricorn. And it was because things were not working that they ended up severing ties with Britain. So, Pluto in Aquarius is just getting started, and it's making us aware of inequalities, excuse me, of human rights violations, of abuse of power. And it's interesting, you brought, RFK and Chiron in Taurus, right? And how there's going to be a test of how these policies will actually materialize Taurus, or what are going to be the physical results with this Chiron in Taurus, which is Taurus's body, and it's part of this health component. Well, RFK, excuse me, let me backpedal. Chiron and Saturn will be conjunct at 8 degrees Taurus. Pluto will be 8 degrees Aquarius. And RFK's Saturn is 8 degrees Scorpio. So that Chiron Saturn in Taurus is going to oppose his, and we'll see, that's definitely a time of reckoning and accountability. And, as Saturn goes, if you did the work, you get rewards. If you didn't do the work, you get the consequences. So that's, that is going to definitely be a time for him to test what are the results. And, you speak about technology and how we're bringing change both on a social level and on a technological level. Now, this mayor of New York, Mamdani, is a Libra. Now, there's something about Libra that is often misunderstood. And we're moving now into the equinox of Libra. So this applies to all of us. You know, we're going on exploring global affairs, but it ties back to our own reality. If you look historically, a lot of the big revolutions, the big turning of events, whether it's the stock market crash, whether it's the big Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, whether it's even, World War II, they all started in the Virgo to Scorpio phase and Libra. There's something about Libra that changes the tides. When something's going one way, we move into the Libra season, and then there's a feeling like either an event, a person, whether it's internal or external, there's something that triggers a change of tide. And sometimes it can be a revolution where, what did you have with the Bolsheviks in October 1917? You had the monarchs being replaced by the socialists. What did you have with the stock market crash? You had a time of, where innocence and prosperity being suddenly, the tides turning to scarcity and to a huge economic crisis, global. So the change of tides is often represented by Libra. And that's why Libra is often associated with controversial shifts. And leaders with strong Libra are also going to be controversial figures. Mamdani is one. He's bringing, in this era of capitalism, he's bringing a socialist, a red wave, as they call it in the United States. So it's not just about socialist policies. It's the fact that Libra brings an opposite. If you're going all the way to capitalism, Libra is going to go to socialism. If you're going all the way to socialism, Libra is going to bring capitalism. It brings the opposite. Another interesting example and another big scandal that erupted during a Libra season is the Me Too movement. 2017, October 5th, is when that article was published about Harvey Weinstein's shenanigans and his abuse of power, and that led to the chain reaction of many victims, many people who are, who were overpowered, who were silenced, who were bribed to be kept silent. Suddenly, the balance of power is shifting, and those who are super powerful are weak. And who is gaining power? It's the women. It's those who were taken advantage of. So that's another Libra twist of shifting tides. And that happens every year on this equinox. So what may shift in our lives globally and personally?
And the equinox happens just really, the equinox moment is that moment when the sun moves into Libra. So the sun goes to 0000 Libra. That is considered the equinox moment. Just before we get to that moment, we are going to have a solar eclipse at 29 of Virgo. I mean, that is something that is, it's just such a powerful symbolism when you think about it. Like, I happen to think that if we look last month we had a new moon at 0 of Virgo. Now we're having this particular eclipse energy at 29 of Virgo. And then immediately, as you're pointing out, the tide changes, we go into Libra season. Have you noticed or have you contemplated what the connections there might be?
I mean, it happens to be that not only is the eclipse at 29 Virgo, it's opposing Saturn at 29 Pisces, and Neptune is at 0 Aries. So all these cardinal energies are definitely bringing momentum and amplify anything that is on the agenda. It happened, there was something similar with a previous equinox in March with a lot of planets going back and forth between 29 Pisces, 0 Aries, 29 0. And we saw this kind of seesaw moment. It was the time where there were a lot of political shift with Trump tariffs and, kind of changing a lot of world dynamics. That's when the new Canada Prime Minister was elected. It's following that equinox that led to a reconfiguration. So I suspect that with this eclipse, there will be leaders, institutions, things that we thought were strong are going to break down and collapse. Because Saturn moving into Pisces, opposing that eclipse, who is going to be eclipsed? There's something that's going to be removed, and there's a house of cards that's going to collapse in the wind or the water or the fire, whatever element we may suspect. But I suspect there is going to be some kind of dissolving of something that we thought is strong, is supposed to hold, is supposed to be resilient, and it's going to weaken. And this can happen again in our own lives when, for better and worse, sometimes, you have a thorn in your side and you think, oh, I have to live with this because it's there. But then, no, it goes away. It dissolves, and you can have a new opportunity. But you can also have things that you thought, like, this table is there for me always, and then the table, falls apart. So it is not an easy eclipse because of that opposition. But let me bring a little more spice and drama, because there's not enough of it. 21st of September, we have the eclipse. 22nd, depending where you are in the world, 22nd, 23rd is the equinox. And then on the 24th, Mars in Scorpio squares Mr. Pluto. And the moon is right there as well. So we have a Mars in Scorpio, moon in Scorpio, same degree, square Pluto in Aquarius. And when Mars moon come together, what is activated is your primitive brain. It's the instinct to survive, the hunger, the security needs. So it's a time where definitely there's a lot of emotional intensity. And it is absolutely a time where the iron's hot and we can shapeshift. Because these energies between the eclipse, Equinox, Mars-Pluto square, we are in this kind of vortex of almost time out of time, where something is shifting and we don't even fully know to what extent and how much and what are the consequences of that. So what, our recommendation for that is if you're waiting for a change, if you need to change jobs, if your relationship is toxic, if there's something that's not working in your life, this will be the catalyst to, to get out of bad situations. But it's also important, especially as we talk about Virgo-Pisces, take good care of your health, boost your vitamin C intake, your immune system, your nervous system going through a lot, just some TLC and, self-care.
And that self-care with Virgo energy, I think, would be that much more more called to, forward for us. And we focus on Virgo as associated with like healthcare and taking care of the body, but Pisces also, in its own way, being opposite Virgo along the same axis, it can also indicate that need to find balance between what's happening within, what's happening with the body, what's happening with spirit, but also the healing that might need to happen as well. And depending on your state of consciousness, your desire of awareness, you're able to recognize that to different levels, right? Depending on the person. But that opposition that you mentioned being so exact with this eclipse energy, with Saturn and with this eclipse, it is quite profound when you consider what it just might stir up and how that might be some difficult truth that we have to sort of contend with and see what it's going to mean in a very practical way.
I think so. I think so. And in some ways, this is why I think, without sounding too, I would say, self-promoting here, but that's part of the reason why we have events like Omega, because it is a time to go to this Pisces healing, to connect with spirit, to remember who we are when we are, otherwise on our day-to-day bombarded with so much stress, so much change, so many, so much corruption. Having events like this where you can be with like-minded and elevate the vibration for yourself and for the world, in our own humble ways. There's something very precious, and that's part of self-care. So there's the educational aspect of the experience, but it's also, are we investing in ourselves to recharge, to replenish? But as a Pisces, I would say, statement, or as a Pisces intention, remember who you are. Remember why you're here. Remember the big picture. Don't get lost and caught in the little dramas, and reset your system.
What a
So if,
wonderful.
whether you are able to use this opportunity or whether you do it at home in your own way, wherever you are when you listen to this, take the time to connect with spirit, be in nature, and really remember why you are on this planet. I think that's very fundamental.
Yeah, we don't always know with detail, but we do know if we're here, it means we have more to do in this lifetime. That's the thing we can say for sure. But maybe we
And to
might be
bring
able to
light,
start. Sorry? To bring light.
to
Yeah.
bring light
Yeah.
in our own little ways.
Wow. Yeah. In all the little ways that we might do. Some people, of course, they've got platforms and they've written books and things like that, like yourself. But then a lot of other people, wherever you are in your life, you have a sphere of influence. And bringing that light, yes, it serves others, but what it does for us as well, it allows us to live more at peace with ourselves. And I think that's part of the great strength of bringing forward that intention, especially in times like this. And look, the thing is with Saturn, Saturn can feel heavy. Like, make no mistake, Saturn can feel heavy. It's an opposition of Saturn as well to this eclipse. So it's almost like, yeah, we really might feel powerless or as if there are things happening outside of us that we don't have any power over that feel burdensome. And yet within that, we can find levity, we can find power, we can find perception that ends up helping us to be useful to ourselves and to others as well. That might be part of this also with this eclipse energy. Now, I do want to make sure to mention a couple of things because, yes, we are going to be doing this event. It is huge. I am so honored to be part of it. And this event in particular, I know it's proving to be quite successful. And actually, the tuition is a lot less than I realized it was. So the tuition is very accessible. And I know that people are getting like Airbnbs nearby and things like that. So there's all kinds of ways for those who might need to make it more accessible for themselves to be able to access this event. And it is essentially in the tri-state area. If you're in the tri-state, it's super easy for you to get to the Omega Center, to get to Rhinebeck. There's a train that takes you right there. So that's the practical stuff. But I don't know if I ever told you, Maurice, about my connection to the Omega Institute. And let me tell you, it was 21 years ago. It was just before my Saturn return. So it was right around the time of my Saturn return, we can say. And I remember at the time, I just really didn't, I was trying out different things and I didn't really have a lot of direction. And I remember I didn't have a lot of money either. I was a student at the time. And I was able to get a scholarship for a program at Omega Institute. This was 21 years ago. And so I went. And it was Gabriel Roth, and it was this, the 5 rhythms. It was like movement and prayer all together. And it was such a powerful experience. And I will tell you, after that experience, everything changed in my life. Everything changed in many ways. It was exactly what I needed just before these huge energies just showed up. Huge energies were having my Saturn return exactly at the time that I had Pluto conjunct my moon exact, and it's Saturn in the first house, and it's the moon is the chart ruler. So there were all these layers of which I was just about to go to this place that I had never been before within myself. I call it like the dark night of the soul. But that experience at Omega was such an anchor for me to be able to tap into a remembrance, a knowing of my power, of my breath, of my body at a time when my friends say that they looked at me over the course of that first year of this transit And they say it's like you were there, but it's like you weren't there. It was like something was gone for a while. And that's exactly it. I felt like I sort of went into this cave. But my experience at Omega was a part of what stayed with me and a part of what helped me to listen to myself, listen to my body, which was part of what brought me out of that dark night of the soul. And so let me tell you, it is going to be that very weekend that we are going to be at Omega Institute, that it will be not just 21 years later, but Saturn trine my natal Saturn, exact to the degree it's going to be trine. And it's such a huge moment for me. You know, personally, I feel how perfect it is. Like I have built something. I don't want to get too emotional. I can be such a sap. I do have Cancer rising, right? But to think about how far I've come. And, you know, I've heard it said, we overestimate what can be done in 1 year and we underestimate what can be done in 10 years. And I will tell you, 25 years later now, right, coming to this whole other place in my life, 21 years later from Omega Institute, to just have that moment of realization that, you know, I've come a long way. And the Omega Institute was such an anchor point for that. And that was really why I said yes when you asked me to be a part of this. I jumped at it and I didn't even know the aspects, but I thought, wow, to facilitate that in another person, to be some part of that for someone else's journey, what a privilege. And so I thank you so much for, you know, in your own way, not even knowing how you ended up playing this very important part of how much this institution means to me. And I know it's going to mean to other people as well.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing that the synergy, you know, of being in a place where the energy is activated, how it affects us on a cellular level, on a consciousness level. And, you know, you make friends to begin with. You know, it's a place where you can get massages and you can, you know, there's a lot of spiritual energy and, you know, treatments and things that you can add to your experience. But I think for many of us, you know, these events, these astrological events are a turning point because there's such a convergence, because something is brought together with the attendees, with the faculty, with the nature, like there's some kind of perfect storm to facilitate, to empower and inspire. And it's a time where we also focus on, you know, part of the theme of the event is Jupiter in Cancer. And it's all about a support system. It's all about that replenishing. Now, you know, as we speak about these sequence of events and transits, just going back to the eclipse motion, leading to the equinox, leading to the Mars-Pluto, whether you are, you know, you can prepare for it and say, you know, I'm waiting for this change, and here there's a portal, you know, I may walk through this, or whether, you know, it comes in ways that you didn't expect. What is great about astrology is that we're not, you know, when we analyze these cycles, we help become more conscious. So when something happens, it clicks and you say, ah, now I understand. So you're not caught by surprise, and you are also in a place where you are able to cooperate with the universe. Because even when there are stressful aspects, the universe is intentional. You know, I have your magnet on my fridge still. The universe is wise and loving. And this is important to remember because some people can get what I call astro-anxious. oh, there's an eclipse. Oh, there's a square. You start to panic because there's so, it could be life changing. It could have dramatic effects. But the intention of astrology is, first of all, prevention. The more you understand it, the more you can minimize the worst case scenario. The same way you're going to look at your chart and understand the health risks. So you can freak out and say, oh, I'm going to die of a heart attack. Or you can say, well, maybe I'm going to take steps to strengthen my cardiovascular system, and I'm not going to die of a heart attack. I'm going to know where my vulnerabilities are to actually change the odds. So there's something about astrology that allows us to talk to our destiny, to talk to the winds, and to be part of the movement rather than be shocked, diminished, and lose our control. So consciousness matters. And that's where we step in as astrologers. So when we talk about these important days, it's to empower us. It's not to scare us. It's a side note.
Yeah. That's incredible to remember, because we can look at the sky and we can freak ourselves right out, or we can look at it and be inspired and see how that whatever might be happening is part of us, what I call moving towards greater love and greater wisdom, what you're calling greater consciousness, right? Being open to the great shift. That is a journey of love and wisdom. And it is our intent behind it that makes all the difference. Now, I don't know if I had a chance to tell you, but it was a year ago. I don't know if we talked about this. We might have. But I ended up on bed rest, right? Because it was like exact Chiron return. It was crazy because I was in Rio de Janeiro and I had an injury on my hip, no less. And the injury, first they sewed it up. Great, go. But then it opened. And then I got an allergic reaction, and that's why it opened. And then they had to bring it down and close it again. And then it opened again. And so I ended up on bed rest, basically. The doctor was like, I need you to not move. I'm in Rio de Janeiro, like the sexiest city in the world, basically. And I'm on bed rest in a hotel. And for 6 weeks, really the only people I saw were the people who worked in the hotel who would bring me my deliveries up because they knew I was on bed rest. It was awful. It was just awful. It was like I needed a nurse for a full month. I needed a nurse. It was really brutal. Yeah. So here's the thing though. At first I was really mad and I was really upset. And then I remember having this very clear moment when, my aunt Shireen, who's been on my channel, I remember her saying to me, just go inside. There's so much peace there. And I tried that. I tried to go inside. And my goodness, the shift in perspective, it was a realization that, wait a minute, I am here in this incarnation at the service of soul. That's what this lifetime is about. It is about soul. Everything else is an illusion. And the big thing I really realized is I had been so afraid of Pluto. I'd been so afraid that it wasn't until I got to the point where I really couldn't do anything else but be still that I realized, you know what happens is going to happen. But what matters, I was able to see what matters in a whole other way. And that's my family. And that's my journey of the soul is what matters. And so for me, it was quite an extreme thing, but it was what I needed to let go of the fear of these aspects. And so my hope is that people don't need to go through these very dramatic things in order to let go of the fear. But I've really come to understand that whatever is happening in the universe, it is happening out of love. Should we intend it? Should we say, I'm going to look at this and see how this is part of my journey towards love? And so, yes, we've got these heavy duty things happening in the sky in September and beyond. We've got these big, scary aspects, but we can also look at them and say, okay, how might this actually be here for a reason? How might this be here so that I can align with that great shift as you were talking about?
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing. I didn't realize it was so brutal. And it's interesting, you talk about Uranus in Gemini. I don't know how much time we still have, but just to add this, I've been doing research on new planets that were discovered actually about 19 years ago. In 2006, the astronomers around this time, the eclipses of 2006, they decided to create a new category of planets called the dwarf planets. And that's when they redefine Pluto as a dwarf planet. And I'm purposefully saying not demoted, because that's the term that's often used. Pluto basically opened a portal to other bodies that are very similar in their chemistry and in their call it anatomy, and one of them is called Sedna. And I was just sharing that I was in Alaska, and Sedna is an Inuit goddess. So this new planet was named after an Inuit goddess, and it's the first time that a major body is named after a deity that is not Greco-Roman. And that opened the gate to other planets named after other goddesses. Haumea is a Hawaiian goddess. Quawar is a Native American. Now, this is representing the shift in our own consciousness. Every time a new planet is discovered, humanity is going through a change. When Uranus was discovered in the 1700s, humanity was going through the Industrial Revolution. And we can go, Pluto brought the stock market crash and fascism and rebirth. So there were always a shift. So when these planets are coming, there is usually something collective. The zeitgeist is shifting accordingly. And Sedna is a planet that is now at 1 degree Gemini, with Uranus on the same degree. You can view a video. If you look at my channel, it's called New Planets, New Era, about these new bodies. And I'm bringing this up because Sedna is a planet that comes to our solar system in its orbit. And like Pluto, it's pretty slow. But then it exits to the far reaches of our solar system, to places that our telescopes, barely reach, so to speak. So its orbit is so elliptical that it's coming close and then it's moving far off. And I'm going to give you numbers so you can get a feeling. Its orbit is 11,000 years. So Pluto is 250 years. That thing, Sedna, is 11,000 years. And what this means, it's a completely new paradigm. It's a completely new consciousness, because Sedna basically goes out and then brings something from the far reaches of the universe back to the solar system. So she's a bridge between worlds. Excuse me. And the mythology of Sedna is that through a very dramatic betrayal from her father and lover, from man, she drowns into the ocean and becomes, sinks to the bottom and becomes a sea goddess. So there's always something about losing control and then embracing a whole new world where she's empowered. So in space, she goes to the very deep depth of the cosmos. And in the mythology, it's the depth of the ocean. Now, she's in Gemini, conjunct Uranus. And Gemini has to do with information, has to do with knowledge. And basically, Sedna is bringing new information that was hidden. Think about that collectively. What information is being kept secret, is not being revealed, and is resurfacing now? That's going to give the conspiracy theorists a lot of food.
Yeah, a lot to work
for their
with
channel.
Yeah, but it's
it brings,
incredible.
it brings this. We talked about Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus trine. So there's that component of Sedna, which brings feminine power into the picture. So let's pay attention to that.
Yes, and feminine power, archetypally, of course, I always think of it. I love, love, love that we live in a time where more of us are able to honor our sacred masculine and sacred feminine energies. We're able to embody both. And as much as I like and love glam, let's just put it out there. I love glam. Anybody who watches me knows how much I love glam. I will put in the time and the effort because it's just so much fun. It makes me feel like a little kid. But at the same time, I think about, the way I was raised to believe that you can have anything you're willing to work for. And as I've grown, I've come to understand that isn't just about material things. It's also about doing the work that insight requires, that healing sometimes requires, that knowing some essential part of you sometimes requires work as well. But that work can be rewarded, that effort can be rewarded. And a lot of things that we would normally, were once the domain of, this is what men do, this is what women do. It's so wonderful that that does not have to be my reality. Like if I want to do something, I do it. And I'm not stopping to think what's an appropriate role, what isn't. And so my hope also with this whole event that we are going to be a part of, I love that we're tapping into the sacred feminine. And it's done in a way that acknowledges that at the same time, there are all these sacred energies you can tap into. And Sedna, what a wonderful symbol that we have playing out right now. My hope is that that brings awareness, like the ways in which,
there's something very graphic happening. Think about the Epstein files.
Yeah.
And the documents that are concealed. And we're asking, the public is asking to release the files. And the man in charge are, trying to divert the attention. And now women, the victim, are gathering, and they say, we're going to create our own list. If you're not releasing the list, we will bring our testimonies and reveal who's on the list. So think about the symbolism of Sedna, who's betrayed by the man, by the lover, and by the father, and she sinks into the ocean, basically unprotected. But as she sinks into the ocean, she loses her finger because her father severs her fingers. So there's something about losing the grip. And she sinks into the ocean, but the ocean embraces her, and she becomes this powerful being. And so this now plays out in Gemini, where there are lists and there's information that can come from the depth of the ocean back to surface, because the women who were betrayed are now empowered. It can get graphic.
Yeah, but it can get so on point too. Just a little bit of insight and a little bit of understanding of metaphor, and you just see it playing out. It's absolutely incredible. So let me just say once again, everybody, it is Maurice, who is part of Astrology, Consciousness, and the Great Shift, taking place at the iconic Omega Institute. And this is celebrating the feminine in astrology. So this event is set to be amazing. It is a weekend event. It's got big dogs, including Maurice, including Anne Ortili, including Lynn Bell, Hannah Tarajura that you've seen on my channel. And of course, I'm going to be there as well as part of this incredible experience. And I'm really looking forward to learning about Sedna from you, because I know all of us are bringing different goddess perspectives and experiences. So I'm really looking forward for all of us to learn from each other as we co-create this amazing experience together, us as facilitators, but of course with the participants, we're co-creating this learning experience as well.
Thank you so much for this space and for a great conversation, and hopefully, food for thought for us and for the listeners. And may we keep the torch burning for more learning, good astrology, and friendship.
So
and happy eclipses.
Happy eclipses. Yes. Happy eclipses. Happy eclipses to you, Maurice, and everybody out there. And thank you again, Maurice, for being here. And thank you again for watching. It'll be a great transit. It'll be a great event. I hope you enjoy it for those of you who come out. And until we connect again here in this space, take care. Bye.